All right, get ready. Because today we're diving deep into the world of Plato.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about one of the biggest names in philosophy.
Huge.
The guy whose ideas still have people talking centuries later.
Definitely.
And we've got this incredible book in Spanish all about him.
Cool.
And I'm so excited to dig into it with you.
Can be good.
This book, by the way, really jumps right in when it comes to how important Plato was.
It does. Yeah, it starts with this quote I love.
Okay.
It says, "The European philosophical tradition is just a series of footnotes to Plato."
Whoa, wait, hold on.
They're powerful.
A series of footnotes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing when you think about how much influence that implies.
I know, right? I mean, we're talking ideas that have shaped Western thought for over 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And even today, we're still trying to figure out the answers to the questions he was asking.
It's true.
It's amazing.
And you know what's funny?
What?
Plato's real name wasn't actually Plato.
It wasn't.
It was Aristocles. He got the nickname Platon, which means broad. Maybe because of how he was built, who knows?
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder
It does.
if maybe there's a deeper meaning there, too.
I mean, nicknames can tell you a lot about someone, even if it's not intentional.
Yeah.
And with Plato, maybe broad is hinting at how wide-ranging his philosophical interests were, like ethics, politics, even the nature of reality itself.
Totally.
It's cool.
So the book dives into how Plato was considered the first great philosopher.
Right?
Because he took what the pre-Socratic philosophers were doing, studying the natural world, and really broadened it.
And we can't forget the historical context either.
Right.
He was writing during the golden age of Greece,
Oh, yeah.
a time of incredible intellectual and artistic explosion. I mean, think of it. The Parthenon, the plays of Sophocles, the birth of democracy.
Whoa.
It was a time of intense creativity and philosophical thought.
It's amazing.
And Plato was right at the center of it.
Wow. Imagine ancient Athens just buzzing with new ideas.
I know, right?
What a scene. But of course, we can't talk about Plato without talking about his teacher, Socrates.
Of course not.
The guy's a legend, but kind of a mysterious one,
Yeah, absolutely.
because he never actually wrote anything down himself.
Right, and without those firsthand accounts, it just makes his relationship with Plato even more interesting.
Totally.
We have to ask ourselves, how much of the Socrates we see in Plato's writings is the real deal? And how much is Plato kind of using him as a mouthpiece for his own ideas? It's a question that scholars are still debating today.
That's so interesting.
It really is.
Speaking of mysteries, the book tells this wild story about the oracle at Delphi.
Yeah.
The oracle declares Socrates the wisest man alive.
Oh, right.
And so naturally, Socrates, being Socrates, starts questioning all these Athenian experts
He did, yeah.
to see if they really know as much as they think they do.
And of course, what he discovered is that a lot of these so-called experts were basing their knowledge on some pretty shaky ground, like assumptions and contradictions.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
That probably ruffled some feathers.
Especially with the people in power, for sure.
But through all this questioning,
Right.
Socrates comes up with his famous line, "I know that I know nothing,"
Yeah. Such a classic.
which then becomes like a core principle for how Plato approached knowledge.
It's a statement that sounds a little contradictory at first,
Yeah.
but when you think about it, it shows a really deep realization.
Okay.
True wisdom starts with recognizing the limits of what we know. It's about being open to the fact that there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
And that the search for knowledge is a journey, not a destination.
That is powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And it leads us to one of Plato's most famous and definitely most mind-bending ideas, the theory of forms.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
He was trying to solve this problem.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile the constantly changing world we experience with the idea that there's some stable, unchanging reality underneath it all?
Right.
And this was something that philosophers before him had been struggling with, too.
Yeah, like Parmenides, who said that real reality doesn't change, it's eternal. A single, unified entity. He called it the One.
Okay.
And then you had others, like the Pythagoreans, who were fascinated by all the different things in the world.
So lots of different viewpoints.
Yeah.
And Plato was trying to find a way to bridge these seemingly opposite ideas.
Right.
And his solution, his big idea, is this radical concept, the theory of forms.
Okay.
He says that the true, real reality exists in a realm of perfect, unchanging forms. Think of them as blueprints.
Blueprints, okay.
The ideal version of everything we see and experience in this world.
Okay.
So there's a form of a chair, a form of a table, a form of justice, a form of beauty, everything.
Everything, wow.
So the things we see and touch and interact with are just like shadows. Imperfect reflections of these perfect forms that exist beyond our senses.
Exactly. And this is where it starts to get really wild.
Okay.
Because Plato believed that real knowledge had to be about these unchanging forms. He also believed that our senses could only give us opinions, not true knowledge.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So he's saying that what we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, those can't be trusted as real knowledge.
That's the heart of his argument.
Oh.
For Plato, our senses are just limited, unreliable. They're getting bombarded all the time by this constantly changing world around us.
Right.
They can only grasp those fleeting appearances.
So then how do we find true knowledge?
Well, true knowledge has to be about things that don't change, things that are eternal. And to get to that, we need reason.
Okay, so this is where things get really trippy for me.
Yeah.
If our senses can't lead us to true knowledge,
right,
how do we even access these forms?
Okay, so this is where Plato introduces a truly mind-blowing idea.
Wait on me.
It's called anamnesis, which means recollection.
Recollection.
He believed that learning is actually just remembering things that our souls already knew before we were even born, way back when they were hanging out in the realm of forms.
Hold on, so you're telling me that learning is just remembering?
Yeah.
That our souls are like carrying around all this knowledge from before we were even born?
It's pretty radical, right?
That's a lot to process.
But think about it. Those moments when you suddenly understand something.
Oh, yeah.
When something just clicks.
Uh-huh.
And you feel like you've always known it.
Uh-huh.
Plato would say that you're not actually learning something new. You're remembering something your soul knew in its past life, back in the realm of forms.
So those aha moments are actually glimpses into our soul's past life among the forms.
That's the idea.
That's definitely a different way to look at learning.
It is, for sure.
Okay, before we get too deep into this whole anamnesis thing, I'm curious about something else the book mentioned.
Okay, what's that?
Plato really disliked ugly things.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail.
It is, isn't it?
Remember, Plato saw a deep connection between beauty and goodness.
Right.
He said something like, how can you have ugly things when there's an idea of good?
Yeah.
It seems like he had trouble understanding how ugliness could exist if everything is based on perfect forms.
It makes you wonder how Plato would see our world today.
I know, right?
With all its complexities and contradictions and all its beauty and ugliness.
It's a good question.
Something to keep in mind as we explore his ideas further.
Definitely.
Speaking of challenging ideas, I think we need to talk about Plato's political philosophy next.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is where things get really interesting.
It does.
His vision for ideal society, laid out in his book, The Republic, might sound a little dystopian to us today.
It might, yeah.
I've heard a little about this.
Uh-huh.
He has some pretty radical views about how society should be structured.
He does.
Something about philosopher-kings, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So he wants philosophers to run the world.
Well, essentially, yes.
Okay.
He believed that philosophers, people who have devoted their lives to searching for truth and wisdom, are the best equipped to lead. They're the ones who can see past the illusions of the material world, you know?
Okay.
And understand the true nature of justice and what is good.
I can see how this might not sit well with everyone.
Yeah.
So how does this whole philosopher-king society work anyway?
Well, imagine a world where your entire life is determined based on what people think you're good at.
Oh, wow.
In Plato's Perfect Republic, people are divided into 3 classes.
Okay.
The producers, the guardians, and the philosopher-kings, each with their own specific jobs and no chance of moving between them.
Wow, that's a very organized society.
It is.
So you're either a farmer, a warrior, or a ruler.
Pretty much.
But what if a producer suddenly gets really interested in philosophy? Or a guardian wants to create art?
You've hit on one of the main problems with Plato's idea of politics.
Okay.
It puts the good of the group above individual freedom and expression.
I can see that.
He even goes so far as to say we should have strict control over education.
Oh, what else?
Censorship of art and literature, and even state-controlled breeding programs.
Hold on, state-controlled breeding programs?
Yeah.
That sounds like something from a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it?
I get wanting the best for society, but wow, that's a little intense.
Yeah, it is. It makes you wonder.
Where's the line between the well-being of the state and individual rights?
Absolutely.
It's a debate we're still having today, and here's Plato grappling with it over 2,000 years ago.
I know, right?
And this actually brings us back to something else we talked about earlier.
What's that?
Plato's distrust of the senses.
Right.
Remember, he believed that real knowledge is found in the realm of forms, which you can only access through reason.
Exactly.
And this belief directly influenced his political views.
It did.
He said that most people are too easily swayed by how things look and by their emotions.
Yeah.
Which makes them easy to manipulate
Right.
and leads to bad decisions.
So he's saying that we can't trust the masses to govern themselves because they're too caught up in their senses and emotions.
Exactly.
He thought that only those who had really trained their minds through philosophy, those philosopher-kings, would have the wisdom and objectivity to rule fairly.
I see.
Makes you think, right?
It does. It really does.
Think about our world today.
Okay.
We're constantly being fed information, filtered through algorithms and personalized feeds.
It's true.
Are we living in a kind of digital cave, mistaking the shadows on our screens for reality?
Whoa.
Plato's Allegory of the Cave, it feels so relevant in the age of social media and information overload, doesn't it?
It really does.
He was warning us about the dangers of mistaking appearances for reality.
Right.
Of being trapped in our own limited points of view.
And it feels like those challenges are even stronger today, trying to figure out what's true and what's not with all the stuff online.
Exactly.
It's like Plato predicted the internet.
They kind of did.
With all its potential to teach us things.
Yeah.
And to mislead us.
Powerful stuff.
It is. It really is.
So we've covered a lot. Plato's theory of forms, his political ideas, his distrust of the senses.
Anything else we should touch on before we move on?
Yes, I think we should explore Plato's ideas about the soul next.
Okay.
They're really connected to everything else we've been talking about.
All right, let's do it.
Remember his belief in anamnesis.
Learning is remembering.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
That whole concept depends on the idea that we have an immortal soul.
Right.
That exists separate from our bodies.
Okay. So Plato thought the soul wasn't some fleeting thing that just disappeared when we die.
Right.
It's a real thing.
It is.
That holds our essence, our knowledge.
Yeah.
Across different lifetimes.
Exactly.
And it's not just some empty container.
Nope.
He described the soul as having 3 distinct parts.
3 parts.
Reason, spirit, and appetite.
Yeah, just like the 3 classes in his ideal society.
Oh, wow. So there's a hierarchy within us, too.
There is.
I'm guessing reason is at the top, making the decisions.
You could say that. For Plato, reason is our higher self. The part of us that can think rationally and make good choices.
What about spirit?
Spirit is all about courage and ambition.
Okay.
That drive to accomplish things and overcome challenges.
And appetite.
Appetite is all our basic desires and urges, like our need for physical pleasure.
So it's like our internal world is a mini version of his ideal republic.
Yeah.
Reason as the philosopher-king.
Right.
Spirit as the guardians.
Yeah.
Appetite as the producers.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
It is. And just like in his perfect state, he believed that a harmonious soul is one where reason is in control.
Yes.
Guiding us, keeping our desires in check.
But let's be honest.
Okay.
Haven't we all struggled with that battle between reason and desire?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I know I have.
Sometimes that chocolate cake just calls to me.
I know exactly what you mean.
And logic doesn't stand a chance.
Well, Plato would say that's your appetite winning over your reason. He thought that true happiness and fulfillment came from living a virtuous life, which means letting reason lead our choices and actions.
Okay.
He said that giving in to our desires too much just leads to unhappiness.
So it's all about finding that balance.
It is.
Where reason is in charge.
Right.
But we don't ignore our human needs.
Exactly.
And I guess that's where the concept of platonic love comes in.
It is.
Not romantic love in the usual sense.
Right.
But something deeper, more intellectual.
Think of it like a ladder.
Okay.
You start by appreciating physical beauty, but then you climb higher.
Yeah.
You recognize the beauty of the mind, of the soul.
Wow.
And finally, the beauty of the forms themselves.
So it's like a philosophical journey.
It is.
Towards the ultimate beauty, the beauty that goes beyond the physical world.
Exactly. And it all comes back to Plato's core belief that true reality exists beyond our senses.
In the realm of the forms.
You got
it's
it.
all connected.
It is.
And to really illustrate this point about the soul's journey and what happens after we die,
right.
Plato tells a really interesting story in the Republic.
Oh, yeah.
It's called the myth of
The myth of I've heard of this.
It's about this soldier who dies in battle,
Okay.
but then comes back to life
What?
and tells everyone about his experience in the afterlife.
That's wild.
I know. So what happens to him?
Well, describes a place where souls are judged based on how they live their lives.
Makes sense.
People who were virtuous get rewarded,
Oh,
while those who were consumed by desires and did bad things get punished.
interesting.
And then, get this, the souls get to choose their next life.
Wait, they get to choose?
Yeah, they get to pick their next incarnation.
Based on what they learned in their past life.
Exactly. It adds a whole new layer to reincarnation.
I can see that.
It suggests that we have a say in what happens to us.
Yeah.
That we're not just pawns in some big cosmic game.
It emphasizes the power of our choices in this life.
Yeah.
Knowing that what we do has effects that go beyond our time on Earth.
This is some seriously deep stuff.
It is.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of Plato's thoughts, but...
We've covered a lot.
I know, right?
The book has so much more to say about his legacy,
Yeah.
his impact on Western philosophy,
Right.
and how his ideas could even be applied to our world today.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back. And I'm still thinking about Plato's theory of forms
Me too.
and this whole idea that learning is really just remembering stuff.
Yeah, wild stuff.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
Right.
we have to get back to Plato's political philosophy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because you were saying that his ideas about an ideal society
Uh-huh.
might sound kind of dystopian to us today.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, imagine a world where your whole life is decided for you
Right.
based on what other people think you're good at.
It's like in his perfect republic, people are put into these three groups.
The producers, guardians, and philosopher-kings.
And there's no moving between them, like you're stuck.
It's a system designed to make sure everything runs smoothly, keep things stable and orderly.
But it seems like it comes at a pretty big cost.
What do you mean?
Individual freedom.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like a super organized society where everyone has their assigned role.
Right.
You're a farmer, a warrior, or a ruler, and that's it.
But what happens if someone wants something different?
Exactly.
Like, what if a producer finds out they love philosophy?
Or a guardian wants to be an artist.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be much space for that in Plato's system.
That doesn't feel very fair.
It's one of the biggest criticisms of his political ideas.
Yeah.
It prioritizes what's good for everyone over individual freedom and expression.
It feels a little controlling, you know?
It does, and he actually goes even further.
Yeah, I don't know. What else?
He says we need to have strict control over education,
Okay.
censorship of art and literature,
Whoa, really?
and even state-controlled breeding programs.
State-controlled breeding programs. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right?
So he's basically saying that we can't be trusted to make our own choices
Kind of, yeah.
about who we love, what we create, even who we have children with.
It's intense, isn't it?
That's a lot.
He thought these measures were necessary to keep things harmonious, to stop things from falling apart.
So control was key.
To him, yeah.
And I guess this ties back to what we were talking about before.
What's that?
Plato's distrust of the senses.
Oh, right.
Remember, he believed that true knowledge comes from the realm of forms, and you can only get there through reason.
Exactly.
And this belief shaped his political views in a big way.
It did. He argued that most people are just too easily influenced by what they see and feel.
And that makes them vulnerable.
To manipulation, yeah, and to making bad decisions.
So he's basically saying that the average person can't be trusted to govern themselves
Pretty much.
because they're too controlled by their senses and emotions.
He believed that only those who had trained their minds through philosophy.
The philosopher-kings.
Exactly. That they were the only ones with the wisdom and objectivity to rule fairly.
It's interesting to think about all this in the context of our world today.
How so?
Well, we're constantly bombarded with information.
Oh, yeah.
So much of it is filtered through algorithms and personalized feeds.
Right.
It makes you wonder if we're all just living in a digital version of Plato's cave,
Ooh. Interesting.
mistaking the shadows on our screens for the real deal.
It's like Plato predicted the internet
He kind of did.
and all its potential to enlighten us.
And to mislead us.
It's both fascinating and a little bit frightening,
Totally.
but it really highlights how relevant his message still is.
What do you mean?
We have to be careful,
Yeah.
question what we see and hear,
Right, yeah.
critically think about the information we come across.
Especially online.
Exactly, and try to break free from those limited perspectives.
It's like Plato gave us a roadmap for navigating the complexities of the digital age.
He kind of did.
Okay, so we've talked about Plato's theory of forms, his political ideas,
Right.
his distrust of the senses.
Yep. Is there anything else we need to cover before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about Plato's ideas about the soul.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They're really tied to everything else we've been discussing.
They are. Remember, his belief in anamnesis, learning as remembering, that whole idea rests on the foundation of an immortal soul that exists independently of the body.
Right, so he's saying the soul isn't some temporary thing that disappears when we die.
Exactly.
It's real, it endures.
Yeah.
And it carries our essence and knowledge across lifetimes.
And it's not just some passive container.
Okay.
He described it as having 3 different parts.
3 parts.
Reason, spirit, and appetite. Just like the 3 classes in his ideal society.
It's like we have a little society inside of us.
It is, isn't it?
So reason is at the top, calling the shots.
You could say that.
What does reason represent?
Well, for Plato, reason is our higher self. Okay.
It's our ability to think rationally and make good choices.
What about spirit?
Spirit is about courage and ambition.
I like that.
It's that drive to achieve things, overcome challenges.
Okay, and appetite.
Appetite is all our basic desires and urges, things like our need for physical pleasure.
So it's like our internal world is a mini version of his republic. Reason as the philosopher-king, spirit as the guardians, and appetite as the producers.
It's a great analogy.
And I guess, just like in his ideal state, Plato believed that a harmonious soul is one where reason is in control.
He did.
It guides our actions, keeps our desires in check.
Exactly.
But let's be real.
Okay.
Who hasn't struggled with that internal battle between reason and desire?
Oh, all the time.
I know I have.
Sometimes that chocolate cake just wins.
I know exactly what you mean.
Logic goes right out the window.
Plato would say that's your appetite taking over your reason.
He would.
And he believed that true happiness and fulfillment come from living a virtuous life.
Which means allowing reason to guide our choices and actions.
He said that giving in to our desires too much only leads to unhappiness and disharmony.
So it's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where reason rules.
Right.
But we also acknowledge our human needs.
It's a tricky balance.
And I guess that's where the idea of platonic love fits in.
Exactly.
Not romantic love in the traditional sense,
Right.
but something more elevated, more intellectual.
Think of it as a journey, like climbing a ladder.
Oh, yeah.
You start with appreciating physical beauty, but then you move up. You start to appreciate the beauty of the mind and the soul.
Deeper.
And finally, you reach the beauty of the forms themselves.
Wow, it's like a philosophical quest for the ultimate beauty.
It is.
The beauty that goes beyond the physical world.
And it circles back to Plato's main belief.
That true reality exists beyond the senses, in the realm of forms.
Exactly.
It's amazing how it all connects.
I know, right?
And to really hammer home this point about the soul's journey and what happens to us after we die.
Right.
Plato tells this fascinating story in the Republic.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's called the myth of
The myth of I've heard of this one.
It's about a soldier who dies in battle.
Okay.
But then he comes back to life.
What?
And he tells everyone about his experiences in the afterlife.
I can't wait to hear this.
So describes this place where souls are judged based on how they lived.
Makes sense.
Good people are rewarded.
Okay.
And those who are bad, well, they're punished.
Interesting.
And then, get this, the souls get to choose their next life.
Wait, what? They get to choose?
Yeah, they get to pick their next incarnation based on what they learned in their past life.
So we have a say in our destiny.
It suggests that we do.
That we're not just puppets in some grand cosmic play.
Exactly. It emphasizes the importance of making good choices in this life.
I see that.
Knowing that our actions have consequences that reach beyond our time on Earth.
Makes you think.
It does, and it makes you wonder what Plato would think about our modern world.
I know, right?
And how his ideas might apply to the challenges we face today. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Plato.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've covered so much.
So much.
His theory of forms, those wild political ideas, his insights about the soul.
It's mind-blowing stuff.
It is. It really is.
So now what?
Now, I want to try to connect all the dots. You know, what's the big picture here? What's Plato's lasting legacy?
Well, the book makes a really important point.
Yeah.
Plato's influence goes way beyond the specific ideas he had.
Okay.
He fundamentally changed how we approach philosophy.
I can see that.
I mean, before him, the focus was mainly on understanding the natural world, like what the universe is made of, how it all works.
Right, like those pre-Socratic philosophers were the original scientists in a way,
Exactly.
trying to unravel the mysteries of nature.
But Plato shifted the focus.
He did, didn't he?
He said that philosophy shouldn't just be about explaining the physical world.
So what should it be about?
He said we need to tackle bigger questions.
Like what?
Ethics, politics, knowledge, the nature of reality itself.
Wow.
He expanded what philosophy could be.
He really did. And in doing so, he laid the foundation for how we think in the West today.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. It's like he's the architect of Western philosophy,
I like that.
creating the framework for how we ask those big questions about who we are, why we're here, and how we should live.
And his ideas still resonate with us today.
Why is that?
Because they address those fundamental human concerns that go beyond any particular time or culture.
Like his allegory of the cave.
Exactly.
Such a powerful metaphor.
For the human condition, absolutely.
For our struggle to see past the illusions of the material world.
And to grasp those deeper truths.
And it feels like that struggle is even more relevant now.
Also.
In our modern world, with all the information overload and all these different versions of reality floating around, especially online.
It makes you wonder how Plato would handle the internet.
I know.
With all these carefully constructed realities.
And echo chambers everywhere you look.
I think he might say we've built new caves for ourselves.
Digital caves.
Exactly.
Could be just as deceptive as the one in his allegory.
It's like we're surrounded by shadows now.
But they're digital shadows.
Designed to keep us hooked.
To keep us clicking and consuming.
It's fascinating and scary at the same time.
It really is.
But it shows how important Plato's message is.
What's that?
We have to be careful, question what we see and hear.
Think critically about the information that comes our way.
Definitely online.
And try to break free from those limited viewpoints.
It's like Plato gave us the tools to navigate this crazy digital world.
To be more discerning thinkers.
Exactly.
And better citizens.
And remember, Plato wasn't just interested in exploring ideas.
There was more to it.
He believed philosophy should lead to action.
Okay.
It should help us become better people.
And build a better society.
That's right. His writings are full of practical advice.
Like what?
How to live a virtuous life.
Okay.
How to develop wisdom. And how to contribute to the common good.
He was more than just a philosopher in an ivory tower.
He was an activist.
A reformer?
He wanted to use his ideas to make a real difference in the world.
That's inspiring.
It is, and it's a key part of his legacy.
Yeah.
He reminds us that philosophy isn't just an abstract thing.
Okay.
It's a call to action.
I like that.
A guide for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Okay, so we've explored Plato's big ideas, the criticisms, the historical context, his lasting impact, even how his ideas might apply to our world today.
We've covered a lot.
We have. But before we wrap up, I have one last question for you.
Shoot.
What's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
That's a good one.
What should they be thinking about long after this deep dive is over?
After reading this book and revisiting Plato's ideas, the thing that really struck me was his dedication to asking big, challenging questions.
He wasn't afraid to rock the boat.
Not at all. He challenged conventional wisdom.
Pushed the boundaries of thought.
And wrestled with those deep mysteries of existence.
He was a true philosophical pioneer.
He was.
Blazing a trail for others to follow.
And reminding us that seeking knowledge and wisdom is a lifelong pursuit.
I love that.
It's a journey.
So don't be afraid of challenging ideas.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Embrace that process of questioning and exploring.
And be open to being transformed by the ideas you encounter.
It's all about growth.
Question everything, explore different perspectives, never stop learning.
I like that.
That sounds like a pretty solid life motto, inspired by Plato.
It does, doesn't it?
It does. And, as we were wrapping up this deep dive, the book actually left us with a really interesting question.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
I think it's perfect for our listeners to ponder.
Okay, I'm listening.
If you were to apply Plato's idea of forms to your own life,
okay,
what would be some examples of forms that resonate with you?
Big question.
And how would those forms relate to the imperfect versions of things you encounter every day?
That's a tough one.
It is, isn't it? It's like a personal challenge to take Plato's abstract concepts and make them relevant to our own lives.
I like it.
So think about it. What are those perfect blueprints for you?
Okay.
those ideal versions of things you're striving for.
Like what?
Maybe it's the form of a loving relationship,
Right.
a fulfilling career,
Uh-huh.
a just society, or even a meaningful life.
Big questions.
They are.
So how do those forms guide your choices and actions in this messy world?
Exactly. It's about using Plato's ideas as a lens
A way of seeing.
to examine our own values, our hopes, our experiences.
Makes sense.
It's about seeing the world through a philosophical perspective,
And letting those insights shape how we live.
how we interact with others, and how we contribute to the world.
Well said.
I think that's the perfect note to end on.
It is.
A challenge to take Plato's wisdom and make it our own.
I love it.
It's been a pleasure exploring the world of Plato with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And a huge thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us on this philosophical adventure.
Keep those thinking caps on.
Keep questioning, keep exploring.
Until next time.
Take care.